Great thank you to all of you. Last but not least, I would like to thank our institutional partners, the Fine Arts Academy in Kraków, KRAKÓW, International Cultural Center, Museum of Photography, Galeria Podbrzezie, and the Three Seas Foundation. Thank you to Mocak and to the National Museum in Kraków, whose shows you will see later. Thank you. We truly feel, thanks to your participation, that the Congress is integrated with the life of the city, and indeed so much life is breathed into our city thanks to your day-to-day activity. Thank you so much. Last but not least, a great thank you to our guests of honor. Once again, I will mention the Honorary President Henry Merrick Hughes, the former President of AICA Poland and Vice President of AICA International, Anda Rothenberg, who spoke yesterday in the evening beautifully, as well as our honorable keynote speakers, Maria Teresa Alves, Karen Archie, Nikita Kadan, and Elizabeth Povinelli. Thank you to all the speakers and moderators. Thank you to our coordinator, Paulina Tokasz-Mazurek, all the volunteers, the technical staff involved, and all the guests who decided to join us during this conference. We are particularly proud to host the members of the AICA Academy program, and great thanks to Mathilde Romain for organizing their visit in Kraków. Thank you a lot. Now, if you let me, I would like to invite to the stage Mr. Robert Piaskowski, the Plenipotentiary for Culture in the city of Kraków.
Good morning, buenos dias, bonjour. I know that you have 3 languages of AICA, so at least I try to say a few words in all of them. We wanted to welcome all of you on behalf of the mayor of the city, but also of the city council, and chairwoman of the Commission of Culture is present here. So let me say a few words on behalf of both mayor and city council. Tonight I will speak a little bit longer, so I promise to Mr. President to do not speak too long this morning. So this time is just to wish you a wonderful conference, to wish you a beautiful experience of being in Kraków, experiencing complex cultural environment of this city, but also exchanging ideas, giving important remarks to the major topic of the conference, which is very important for us, for the city of great cultural infrastructure also and strong institutions, but this, let's say, bottom-up movement is also very important and very strong. And last but not least, I wanted to thank to Małgorzata Ujma and to President Arkadiusz Półtorak, but also Magdalena Ujma and Małgorzata Kaźmierczak, because they were the first person coming last year to my office asking, is it possible that city could contribute to AICA Congress in Krakow next year? And I said, are you kidding me? It's really possible that AICA will get back to Krakow after years? And they both said, yes, it's possible. We are actually trying to convince AICA members in Chile to trust, to come to Krakow. So thank you for your trust, thank you for choosing Krakow, and thank you AICA for organizing this very important gathering of AICA in Krakow. Enjoy conference and all the days in Krakow. Thank you so much.
I should also mention that we received support from many more people in the city office, in the municipal office and the city council than I mentioned in the beginning. I only mentioned the representatives who are present here, but I should also mention Mrs. Katarzyna Olesiak, the director of the Culture and Heritage Department, Mrs. Anna Florkowska, Anna Frankiewicz, Barbara Kiczek, Małgorzata Jurczyk or Bolesław Kosior. such a great amount of supportive, fantastic people. Now, if I may, I would like to invite to the stage the Honorary President of AICA International, Henry Merrick Hughes.
Dear friends and colleagues, dear Arkadiusz, dear Małgorzata, and I should thank the whole city of Krakow. It's a great pleasure and honor to be here, and I've been asked by our president, our outgoing president, Lisbeth Rebollo Gonzalez, just to say a few words of welcome, but she has sent a video, and perhaps I'll confine my few words to after showing you the video, which we can now perhaps look at. She sends her deep apologies and regrets not to be here, and anyway, you will hear her speak on the video.
Dear Arkadiusz Poltorak, President of AICA Poland, dear Małgorzata Kazimierczak, Vice President of AICA International, dear Henry Merrick Hughes, Honorary President of AICA, who will represent me through this Congress. Through Henry Merrick Hughes, I greet the authorities present at the opening of the Congress. Dear AICA members, artists, curators, students, ladies and gentlemen, the International Association of Art Critics holds with great satisfaction its 55th Congress in Krakow, a Congress that is impeccably organized by AICA Poland under the coordination of Małgorzata Kazimierczak and Arkadiusz Poltorak. The subject we are going to debate is of utmost importance in the current days. The 2023 Congress launches an inquiry to art makers and art critics about the ongoing crisis and transformation of cultural institutions and the art criticism itself. The circumstances of the loss of the hegemonic status of liberal and social democratic ideals in the West and the unfitness of the cultural institutions to meet the challenges that arise will be addressed. Annual international AICA congresses are very important in AICA's life, exactly because they project up-to-date questions in the field of art, art criticism, and society. We can say they are milestones for AICA worldwide membership and the art establishment at large. This is a reason for AICA's commitment to annual congresses. Every time we begin a summit, I consider to be important recalling a little of AICA's history and the meaning of the congresses in the trajectory written throughout the last 75 years of our association. AICA was born in the immediate aftermath of the Second World War in the framework of UNESCO, aiming at collaborating with the entity to contribute to the reconstruction of ethical values. In an international dimension, it also aims at promoting the approximation between different cultures and recognizing the importance of the difference. The first summits were made around a debate about what were criticism and its social role at the time. Art historians, art critics, and directors of museums of modern art gathered at the two meetings at UNESCO headquarters in 1948 and 1949 to discuss the foundation of an international association of art critics. Convening from around the world, they included the most prestigious names of those days. Following the two international congresses at UNESCO, the International Association of Art Critics was founded in 1950 and was admitted in 1951 to the rank of NGO. Today, it can be said that AICA is a consolidated forum for communication in the field of culture and art, where many different voices can express themselves. AICA Poland has already hosted congresses in 1960, 1976, and 1999. Each of them, in different moments of the Polish history, were memorable. And I'm sure the 2023 Congress will also be memorable for the Polish art scenario and for the international one. I'd like to welcome all the speakers and the audience that will be with us throughout these days of cultural debate. Thank you, and my wishes for all of you to leave this summit empowered with new inquiries. I am very sorry I can't be with you in person, but I will be present in the online activities. Ladies and gentlemen, enjoy the Congress.
Thank you, dear Elizabeth. We'll have an opportunity this afternoon to pay proper tribute to you, I hope, for 6 years as a very successful and inspiring president of AICA. I only wanted to add just a couple of rather personal comments, and that is, if I may, and that is that AICA Poland has always had a special place within the organization. And I would add just a little bit to what Ander Rothenberg was saying yesterday. My own first contact, close contact, was with Alexander Wojciechowski in 1981, when he was the commissioner for the Polish pavilion in Venice, and I was the British commissioner. And it was a very moving occasion, because Wojciechowski then passed round Solidarność labels to all the international delegates who had come to meet in Venice to discuss the Biennale. And I travelled back with him on the train to Milan, and he said, you know, I won't be back here, and he wasn't. That was a tough time. And you heard from Ander how you resisted throughout the period of military rule, and how the association thrived and survived. What you didn't say was when Ander came to Venice, she was the only person from Eastern Europe who was not financed at all. She had not a penny. She managed to get the permission to travel, and everyone helped out as best they could, which is exemplary. And then, of course, she was a leading figure throughout, and we had... there was an incident, there was the 1975-76 Congress, and if you go to the National Museum, you'll see there the biggest and most impressive painting from that period on the wall. And I'm ashamed to say I didn't have my pen with me to write the name down. It was by an artist who contributed to the AICA Congress in 1976. It's a very handsome painting called The Mysteries of the Villa. After that, then I've nearly finished. I just had one or two more things to say. There was also, during the time of Andrzej Sierski, there was a little conference seminar we held in Venice about Polish representation at the Venice Biennale, which was a very interesting occasion. And now, of course, we have the inspiring new leaders of AICA Poland. And we have two sets of elections coming up, one of which is, of course, for the international presidency, and we'll learn the outcome of that soon. But the leading candidate, it has been announced already in the first round of votes, is Małgorzata. And the other set of elections is also, could be a very important turning point. As Małgorzata told me, it could be a bit comparable to the AICA Congress in the Soviet Union in 1988, on the brink of big change. So I wish you all good fortune, whatever the outcome of the elections, of course, both at the national level and at the AICA level. And I wish all of you a very happy and productive conference. Thank you.
Thank you, Henry. It's a real honor to have you here with us today. Thank you. Now I would like to invite a representative of the National Commission University, the Dean of the Faculty of Arts, Łukasz Murzyn, today's co-host.
Thank you, Arkadiusz. Ladies and gentlemen, I am pleased to welcome you on behalf of the University of the National Education Commission, the Faculty of Arts, and the 3Cs Art Foundation. Welcome the boards and members of the International Association of Art Critics. Welcome all our distinguished guests, speakers, and participants of AICA Congress. Nice to see you in Krakow. We meet in a special city, one of regional capitals of culture and contemporary art. In a city that has several large and dozens of smaller cultural institutions, the city of many different artistic festivals, many smaller and 2 larger art schools, the city of a huge number of NGOs of the cultural sector, and in the city of outstanding theoreticians, historians of art, and art critics. At the same time, it is a place where it is easier to understand contemporary cultural, economic, and political tensions, where you can analyze power games in institutions and competition for the attention of cultural participants. It is obvious that in these conditions we are looking for a new attitude towards heritage, new artistic tactics, and new forms of presentation and inclusion. Our university and the foundation cooperate with many institutions from Krakow and throughout Central Europe to create a new cyclical artistic festival in the region based on a new organizational model. We are searching for a completely horizontal and really pluralistic way of looking on each other. I'm glad that we can support AICA in expanding knowledge about art world institutions. And I wish everyone successful deliberations, and I hope that this meeting will be the beginning of a new level of cooperation for all of us. Thank you, AICA International. Thank you, AICA Poland. And let's have a good discussion today and of the rest of the Congress. Thank you. Thank you.
And I would also like to invite Professor Tomasz Bilczewski, the Dean of the Faculty of Polish at the Jagiellonian University.
Good morning. I'm very pleased to be here representing the Faculty of Polish Studies, Jagiellonian University. Hopefully will not be an institution that is going to be contested here during this conference. I got to know this morning that you were looking at pictures from the dating back to 1975, to the famous congress that happened in Krakow. Although I'm not sure now whether it was 1975 or 1976, because both dates appear like on the 75, really, right? So I was looking at the pictures yesterday, and there was Anna Rothenberg, there were other great figures of Polish culture involved, like Tadeusz Kantor and Jerzy Grotowski's theater. So really great event for us. And Poland at that point was under communism. Our situation today is completely different. But both last decades and last years we learned that it is quite important to take care of independent thinking and critical attitudes. And I hope this is a stage for voicing your thoughts, voicing your views that are of great importance to our cultural institutions. I wish you a great stay here in Krakow. Weather is great, and I'm also very thankful. I want to thank all individuals and institutions, including Arkadiusz Półtorak, who we gladly support this initiative as the Faculty of Polish Studies. So have a great stay here in Krakow and fruitful conversations during the conference. Thank you very much.
Now, if you let me, before we start, I would like to share a few provocative remarks. And I will start with two very short anecdotes. The first might seem inflammatory, but I'm sorry. The first one concerns the largely mythologized biography of a Kraków saint, the Archbishop Stanisław, who lived here in the 11th century and whose remains are still kept in the cathedral at the Wawel Castle. The saint became very famous for his dispute with our ruler, the King Bolesław Śmiały, which translates aptly to Bolesław the Bold. According to some accounts, the bishop excommunicated the king, who had taken brutal revenge on the knights that proved, let's say, reluctant to his military and diplomatic efforts in Kievan Rus. As a result, the king sentenced Stanisław to death by dismembering his body. But as the saint's hagiographers proclaim, his limbs, once thrown into a little pond next to the Vistula river, miraculously reunited. Then, allegedly, eagles flew in from all the corners of the world to guard the body, and the alleged site of this miracle remains an important place of religious cult up to this day. You might wonder why I bring this story up in the context of a debate on contemporary cultural institutions, which is about to begin during our conference. Well, what I find interesting in the story is the symbolic dimension of the miracle. As I tend to believe, such religious, or if you will, mythical tales mobilize the same imaginary that the founders of many secular institutions used to mobilize in modern times. As argued by the great French intellectual Michel Foucault, modern institutions took elements of pastoral power from the clergy, for instance, maintaining that it is the influence of institutions and not the religious faith that can help bind the social body together. The second anecdote is considerably closer to the here and now and refers to a very recent article by the well-known art critic Claire Bishop, who recently visited Warsaw and was truly taken aback by the rift between the programming of various institutions, but also by the traces of social tensions which she noticed in the streets. And I will not recap the text, you can look it up on Art Forum's website, but just let me quote a few sentences that express the critic's general impression. On a two-day trip this past August, I saw a heteropatriarchal nationalist religious right state against a younger, international, college-educated, gender-fluid center-left. It's a familiar opposition, but this particular encounter left me uneasy. By the end of my stay, I was left asking whether culture should speak only to its preferred constituencies, or whether we should secretly still harbor a belief in art's power to communicate to a broader public. Now, I would risk the presumption that both of the anecdotes touch upon the same social cultural imaginary, which in line with Foucault's writings I would term pastoral. The imaginary that encompasses fantasies and desire for universal communication, social unity, and common understanding. However, the tone of Claire Bishop's text is symptomatic of its ongoing depreciation, if you will. Confronting the results of social antagonisms as seen in Polish cultural institutions, Bishop ponders about the possibility of restoring a common culture and a universal form of address that would allow the cultural institutions to, quote, communicate to a broader public. However, she does not sound very convinced that this task has a great chance of success. She clearly assumes that to think otherwise would amount to, well, I don't know, naivety. The theme of this year's AICA Congress, Contested Infrastructures, points towards the decreasing belief in modern institutions, universal outreach and influence in a twofold way. On the literal level, contested means causing dispute or made the object of contention. Undoubtedly, these qualities correspond to modern cultural institutions which in recent decades have become the subject of far-reaching criticisms. The critics often point out that the institutions are not sufficiently inclusive or they're simply too biased, while declaring their steadfast attachment to the universal common good. One should remember, however, that the English word contested also means, well, it carries an intimate link with the word contest. So in other words, rivalry. Contested means subject to dispute or contestation, but also being made the object of competition. The secondary meaning reminds us that political conflict and rivalry accompany almost every act of critique, and for what it's worth, the political tensions that have emerged globally and affected modern cultural institutions in the last 20-something years, at least since 9/11, I would say, they're quite difficult to forget or suppress. Notably, the parties involved in contemporary social and political conflicts have an increasingly hard time while trying to resolve them through recourse to the universal common values. Whose values exactly is the question that pops up, and I would say for the right reasons. Today we have gathered at a conference that accompanies the assembly of a multinational association. The association which, if only through its long-lasting affiliation with UNESCO, remains committed to the public good and in the broadest possible sense. There is no way of blurring the differences between us, however, and differences are actually also something that can strengthen our organization and definitely enrich our debates. People from more than 20 countries have gathered here, and we will be discussing a multiplicity of institutional and aesthetic traditions during this conference. We have gathered here in the spirit of sharing and mutual understanding, and importantly, we will share knowledge not just among AICA members. After all, this conference is a public event, and right now I would like to once more extend a warm welcome to all the guests who have come here to participate in the proceedings. This situation, I hope, can inspire a different imaginary from the one illustrated by the story of Saint Stanisław. Perhaps we need a different type of miracle nowadays in order to live up to the challenges of the day. My mind is already conjuring images of dissected limbs that start moving and communicating with each other while still remaining disjointed. But perhaps it's better to think of other miracles, more ordinary, more everyday miracles, I would say. For instance, the kind of miracles that happen in the course of a conversation, which doesn't merely amount to an exchange of opinions. A conversation that's based on mutual, tender, attentive listening. And the miracle of communication despite distance, despite radical differences. I wish for all of us here to experience this type of miracle today and in the upcoming days, continuously throughout the whole Congress. Thank you so much. And without further ado, one more word. I would like to invite the chair of the first panel, Dorota Jarecka, who will introduce the panelists. And let's start. Thank you.
Hello, everybody. Hello, dear colleagues from AICA, dear guests. It is a big pleasure to open the first panel session of the Congress. It occurs to me that the Congress has been perfectly opened and we can start now set to work. And I would like to invite, and our first panel is dedicated to the issues of the neo-avant-garde and the institutional practices in the East and Central European region. In the panel we have 4 or 5, it is hard to say because we have 2 teams, so 5 outstanding scholars, but it seems to me that 3 of you are present. So I would like to invite you to join us. Maria Rogucka. Maria Rogucka will speak as first. She will open the panel. She is an art historian and critic from the Jagiellonian University in KRAKÓW and from the University in Zaragoza in Spain, where she is a doctoral candidate. The second talk is by Katarzyna Cytlak and Daniel Green. Daniel, are you here with us? Hi, will you join us? Daniel has arrived from Bratislava, Slovakia, and unfortunately Katarzyna Cytlak is not with us. She couldn't arrive. But the authorship is it's a team authorship. So both of you are the authors of the second talk, and the last. Our last speaker will be Javier Galan, and I would like also to invite you to sit with us from Zaragoza. So we have 2 Zaragoza representatives, but also there is another person from Zaragoza, I guess, who is also absent, and this is Anna Biderman, right, Javier? And she also couldn't, unfortunately couldn't, she hasn't arrived, but Javier will represent the team of those 2 scholars. So now I would like to invite Maria, who will talk on the controversy around the gallery of the Central Bohemian region in Kutna Hora. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much for your introduction. It's always a privilege to speak in your own country where your surname is pronounced very well, although this time challenging seeing my 2 supervisors in the audience. But there is no escape, so let me start. Can we? So my paper delves into the institutional practice at GASK, Central Bohemian Gallery in Kutna Hora, Czech Republic, within the backdrop of the economic crisis triggered by managerial choices and political instability during David Rad's tenure as the governor in Czech Hetman of the Central Bohemian region. Investigating the role of the politicized government as an art patron, I will explore the establishment of regional art programs against the backdrop of contemporaneous debates on government support for the arts, cultural democracy, and national identity. The presentation will mainly touch upon the management of the permanent exhibition States of Mind Beyond the Image, examining artistic approaches associated with the broad phenomenon of Czech art scene in the GASK collection, spanning from regionalism to a social viewpoint. The paper further analyzes the history, function, and meaning of GASK, emphasizing how this art institution, through its policy, programs, collections, exhibitions, technologies, and architecture, shapes regional and national values, influences cultural attitudes, and informs social and political ideologies. I started by discussing the primary exhibition hosted by this art institution. GASK's enduring collection, titled States of Mind, emerged as the winner in the Museum Exhibition of the Year category during the 13th edition of Gloria Musealis in 2014. This competition is organized by the Czech Ministry of Culture and the Czech Museums and Galleries Association. The category featured a total of 43 projects, and the curator of the permanent collection, Richard Drury, was honored with the Gloria Musealis Prize. The jury, in its favorable evaluation of the States of Mind collection, made the following statement. In the new permanent collection, the preceding arrangements, conceiving according to the years the artworks were acquired, was replaced by an innovative and inspiring means of presentation based on the diverse spectrum of humanity's mental and spiritual life. It provides the viewer with much greater room for active experience and stimulates an intense perception of the artworks, whatever the viewer's linguistic or cultural background is. The straightforward architectural design doesn't distract viewers' attention, but on the contrary, enhances their experience of the exhibits on display. End of quote. Thus, GASK's art collection predominantly covers the late 19th century to the first decade of the 21st century, focusing on Czech art. However, the division into universal states of minds aims to unite the international backgrounds of visitors, moving beyond a narrow focus on the Czech context. Similar to any museum collection, it possesses strengths and weaknesses, influenced not only by financial factors and curatorial priorities, but also by the socio-political shifts in the Czech Republic since the establishment of Central Bohemian region in 1963. The gallery, initially thriving in the liberal 1960s under Jiří Kochutek's leadership, faced challenges during following decades, marked by the promotion of realism over abstraction after the Soviet occupation in 1968. The post-1989 democratic transition led to changes in management, with Jan Sekera directing a return to the gallery's original mission as a museum of modern and contemporary art, culminating in its renaming to the Czech Museum of Fine Arts in 1993. Subsequently, it became GASK under the administration of the Central Bohemian region. GASK's collection reflects this turbulent history, juxtaposing avant-garde works with those influenced by dogmatic ideologies. The decision to abandon chronological presentation allowed for a more profound exploration of art scene, akin to metaphorical window cleaning, delving into the inner world of the artist. The ahistorical nature of GASK's permanent exhibition is argued to have roots in the Czech psyche, characterized by skepticism and historical linearity disrupted by traumatic events and collective amnesia. After extensive deliberation, the exhibition distilled 42 states of mind into 21 pairs, forming a dialogue between complementary or contradictory poles. These encompass emotions and concepts such as solitude, friendship, courage, fear, hope, skepticism, and more. The configuration of the Jesuit college halls provided an ideal setting for this approach, turning each space into a platform for intellectual and emotional interaction between artworks, embodying seemingly opposing states of mind. What controversies existed beyond the decision-making process and the establishment of values for GASK as a historic yet with new location institution. The present state of GASK was anticipated by a nearly forgotten incident in 2009 when David Rad, a Czech physician and former politician, the recently elected governor of Central Bohemian region, dismissed the head of a significant regional institution located in Prague without providing any explanation. Although it was later revealed that this exercise of power had another understandable motive involving the newly reconstructed Jesuit college in Kutná Hora and an alleged reluctance of the director Ivan Neumann to relocate the gallery from Prague to Kutná Hora, it failed to garner sympathy from the artistic community. Despite signed petitions and expressed disagreements, the matter subsided over time. Eventually, Jan Trestik assumed the role of the new gallery director, forming a new team, and operations resumed at the Jesuit college. Initially, things improved and art committee was satisfied until the next controversy. Jan Trestik embezzled a painting by a Russian painter Vasily Kandinsky. In early May, shortly after Artichoke TV released their initial critical report regarding the gallery of the Central Bohemian region, the police arrested David Rad and the governor of the Central Bohemian region. The question remains, what are the consequences and values coming out from the controversies in the economic sector in the Czech Republic? The documentary emphasizes the importance of shedding light on the current operations of such institutions. It asserts that considering the ongoing public selection process for art institution directors and concealed financial aspects, the report aims to serve as a case study. The authors of this documentary claim that the trend of individuals without relevant expertise assuming leadership roles in cultural institutions is notably prevalent in Czech Republic. While a cultural institution led by a professional struggling with budget balancing can seek support from financial consultants when managed by an individual lacking sector-specific knowledge, the hope is that they won't shape the institution solely based on profit-oriented business rules. Throughout the report, there is a belief that a public institution should not only emphasize effective economics, but more importantly, provide top-quality service to the public. As pointed out by renewed Czech art historian and curator Marie Bergmanova in her publication 1 to 3, The Tracks of History in Acquisitions, within the archives of the Gallery of the Central Bohemian region, there are preserved documents pertaining to the initial acquisitions made for the planned regional gallery. These acquisitions from the very outset include significant works by artists such as Józef Čapek, Jan Kotik, Emil Fila and others, which formed the essential foundation of the gallery's collection. In the recent interview with Hanna Slivova in 2020, it is emphasized that Marie Bergmanova had the privilege to scrutinize the collection not solely from an art historical perspective, but primarily with a focus on the motivations underlying the acquisition of individual artworks. Bergmanova stated that the general public seldom has the opportunity to comprehend the extent of mediocre or subpar paintings that galleries hold in their repositories. According to her, it is imperative to unveil and elucidate how the acquisition of art for collection is influenced and the roles played by political, governmental, and various external influences. I hold the belief that fostering public awareness regarding art institutions, the behind-the-scenes process of collection creation, and the associated procedures is essential to ensure, to some degree, the ongoing continuity and existence of avant-garde art on display. Since its relocation to Kutná Hora, GASK appears to maintain such dialogue and transparency with the public. By the end of 2014, more than 20 guided tours for the public had already been held for the new permanent exhibition. The new concept of presentation was mediated by art workshops for children. A part of these workshops, during those workshops that you got to know works of Petr Květala, Milos Sevčík, Ales Vasile, and so on. States of mind became the central theme for the summer for the art workshops for children. New programs were created for schools, inspired not only by the collection's works of art, but also by the concept of the exhibition itself. So coming to conclusions, the museum's art collection can be linked to a stratified geological formation with each developmental phase representing a chapter in the institution's history. These chapters mirror the values of contemporary society, encompassing aesthetic, ethical, commercial, and political dimensions. The values deeply rooted in aesthetic assessment and modernist ideas of originality and innovation also reflect the artist's ethical stance towards societal realities. The museum's selection and display of artworks bear market implication and the complex relationship between public gallery institutions and their politically elected funders often leads to conflicts. The museum's collection, far from being merely a compilation of aesthetically pleasing works, serves as a comprehensive survey of art's evolution. While the museum aims to showcase the evolution of art to the public, it inevitably exposes the institution's own evolution. Thus, the permanent collection functions not only as a public display, but also as a revealing narrative of museum's history, a dual role linked to both a confession box and a shop window. Thank you.
Thank you, Maria. That was very fast. And I've got from Arek this paper, but it was not necessary. You still have 10 minutes. Yes, so 10 minutes, you make it, I have an impression that you made it shorter, and why? But maybe later in the discussion we could elaborate on that very interesting topic. But now let's turn to the second paper by Daniel Grün and Katarzyna Cytlak. As I said earlier, Daniel has arrived from Bratislava, and he is a scholar, he's an academic, he's an art critic and a curator. And I remember your wonderful exhibition of Julius Koller in Warsaw, 2016 was it, in the Museum of Modern Art in Warsaw. Revelatory exhibition of the artist previously not very known even in the socialist, post-socialist sphere. So, and Katarzyna is not present. She's not there. But will you also share her part of this study, or no? You will not cut it into. Okay. So now we have a whole we will have the whole paper, which is dedicated to the grassroots initiatives, right? To the archives, independent archives, no institutions at all. And I think that Katarzyna's contribution is about Clemente Padin, and you will naturally speak on Julius Koller. So please.
Thank you very much for introducing me. It's a great pleasure to be here. And actually, as Dorota said, this paper will be joint paper by Katarzyna Cytlak and myself. And we composed the paper. Actually, it's somehow forming the one. So. But I'm not speaking Spanish, so excuse me for if I pronounce some terms wrongly. Okay, so this is the title. Thank you. Since the 1990s, the concept of decoloniality was reworked by the members of the Modernity Coloniality group. The persistence of patterns from the colonial past is captured in Latin American debates on the post-colonial condition by the key analytical concept of the coloniality of power. The term was introduced in the 1990s by Peruvian sociologist Aníbal Quijano to describe a matrix of relations of power that survive colonialism and constitutes a hidden phase of postmodernity. Quijano observed that the sovereignty that guaranteed the continual reproduction of capital in modern societies required the westernization of imagination. The coloniality of power seeks to modify the habitus of the subjected, which is understood as a structure of mind characterized by a set of acquired schemes, sensibilities, dispositions, and tastes, or ways of producing and transmitting knowledge. As Quijano stated, repression was primarily exercised by the means of producing knowledge and perspectives, but also by producing images and systems of images, symbols, meanings, patterns, and instruments of intellectual or visual expression. Naturalizing European cultural imagination was a unique way of participating in colonial power. The transition from the coloniality of power encompasses the artistic endeavors and archival work of Latin American and Eastern European artists. Starting from the late 1960s, the archives were created in opposition to mainstream culture and to institutionalized art world, thanks to the artists' activities as mail art networkers. Latin America and Eastern Europe. The functioning of artist archives in Latin America has been very different from the role they have played in Western Europe and Northern America. From the 1960s to the 1980s, their creation was profoundly impacted by the difficult socio-political and historical context of that era. One of increasing authoritarianism, the rise of subsequent decline of civil military dictatorships, and a condition for artists who work and make a career that differed greatly from those in the so-called West. The creation of archives was above all a necessity, a strategy of self-defense, preservation, and survival. The archival turn in Latin America resulted above all from reduced institutional support and the big development of the art market in the region and the commercial structures related to its art world in general, particularly when compared to the situation in Europe and the United States. Latin American artists of the 1970s and 1980s thus became archivists, documentalists, curators, and architects in order to bridge this institutional gap and to respond to the lack of recognition of their artistic creation in local contexts. In Eastern Europe, self-archiving has been described as a set of practices for recording and organizing artistic activities, often with the aim of controlling their reception. Such an active position, characterized by Zdenka Badovinac as self-historicization, includes the collecting and archiving of documents, recording art forms and social fields otherwise marginalized by local politics and invisible in the context of international art. Thus, what might connect these two regions in self-archiving understood primarily as a political strategy, because it represents the intention of establishing a conversely or differently oriented model of an institution. Now, Clemente Padin's case. Clemente Padin's archive in Montevideo, Uruguay, is primarily focused on decoloniality, conceived from the outset as a decentralized and de-hierarchized tool. The creation of Clemente Padin's artistic archive was intrinsically linked with his activity as a poet and editor of experimental poetry reviews such as Los Huevos del Plata, Ovum 10, and Ovum. Here are some images. Padin organized numerous international exhibitions of visual and experimental poetry. He also participated in several international mail art exchanges and artistic initiatives developed outside of institutional structures. Authors from the Eastern Bloc appeared on the pages of Latin American reviews and were published regularly in Ovum 10. a review of the Nueva Poesia, New Poetry, edited between 1969 and 1972 in Montevideo, Uruguay, by the artist and poet Clemente Padin. The archive's decolonial character results from the fact that it is based on mail art exchanges. Mail art was, above all, an anti-elitist device that eliminated the figures of the art dealer, the gallery owner, and the art critic. The practice of mail art is widely interpreted as an anti-institutional and anti-market action, opposed to the idea that artistic activity centers on the production of enduring objects of little practical value, embalmed in museums for an elite market. In this sense, the archives, based on artistic relations established via mail, could be considered as decolonial in itself, and as a dispositive that can bring new solutions in the art world. The model of a critically active archive could be considered a promoter of decentralized, de-westernized, decolonial, and pluriverse vision of art institution. Its decolonial aspect extends beyond the foundation of the archive itself. Many artists whose works were collected by Padin start only nowadays to be reconsidered by the mainstream art history. Moreover, many of them were, for instance, from Eastern Europe, a region still underrepresented in Latin America. By entering in touch and by promoting artists such as Jiří Valoch, György Galantai, or Jarosław Kozłowski, Padin took a critical stance towards Eurocentric artistic geographies. One of the artists with whom Padin exchanged correspondence was Julius Koller. In 1974, Julius Koller participated in the Prospectiva 74 exhibition in the Museu de Arte Contemporânea da Universidade de São Paulo in Brazil. The presence of artists from Eastern Europe and Latin America was highly significant. Exhibition was exemplary of an active international exchange program staged on the network of contacts promoted by the museum. This was the way how Padin learned about Koller. In 1976, Padin approached Koller with his project entitled Towards the Language of the Action. Cristina Freire characterized the text cards sent from Bratislava to São Paulo as communication devices. His text cards would put distant places into contact, articulate microcosms and macrocosms, imaginary repertoires and everyday situations, game and fiction. Further, Freire claims that in Brazil, the ONV UFO theme is revealing a spirit of time in its contradictions. On one hand, it represents the desire for contact with the unknown within the expanding movement of planetary awareness, with resonances of the ideas from Koller of cosmo-humanist culture and non-anthropocentric significance. On the other hand, mainly from a political point of view, it connotes the imperial race to control and dominate space, signals the advanced vigilance as the modus operandi of totalitarian regimes, which gains specific contours in Latin America. One can stress here parallels between the most violent period of military government in Brazil and the end of Prague Spring in Czechoslovakia. Between Latin America and Eastern Europe, not only may we notice decentralization, but we may also postulate the hypothesis that, in the case of these cultural relations, it is possible to speak of a break with the logic of transatlantic colonial relations. How to continue? Since 2010, the totality of Padin's personal archive, which contains some 35 linear meters of documents, including acquired artworks on paper, leaflets, film performances, cassettes, photographs, and the epistolary correspondence, has been part of the General Archive of the University of Uruguay in Montevideo. It is arranged in the original order provided by the artist. The addition of Clemente Padin's personal archive to the repository at the University Montevideo was made possible thanks to the initiative Red Conceptualismos del Sur. Katarzyna is member of this initiative. This collective initiative originated in 2007, bringing together artists, researchers, and cultural activists from Latin America who, in their research and artistic activity, defend a Latin American perspective and are engaged conceptually and practically in the preservation of local archives in Argentina. Red Conceptualismos del Sur started a project called Archivos en Uso, Archives in Use, an initiative that aims to facilitate access to artists' archives by establishing a digital research platform. Padin's archive functions among 15 archivos en uso. Once digitalized and classified, various documents, images, graphic works, and artist texts will remain freely accessible to the public. The platform questions the politics of the archive in Latin America in a practical way. It responds to the fragility of the personal archive, which has been disappearing due to the lack of institutional support. Now, the Julius Scholar Society. I am involved in this collective, which is a non-profit association whose aim is to preserve, research, enrich, and relate to the public the artistic heritage of Julius Scholar. A collection site and archive of artists' work, a research and study unit, as well as place for public debate and reflection, the Scholar Society organizes domestic and international projects and activities in the areas of fine arts, art history, visual studies, and cultural theory. Scholar Society encourages the exchange of ideas and information in these fields, challenging the canons, geographies, and master narratives of established art histories. Julius Scholar's enormous archive documents his lifelong obsession with acquiring and classifying the visual and textual evidence of the socialist and post-socialist worlds he inhabited. It also offers the key to understanding his artistic practice. He systematically responded to the reality around him and organized, manipulated, and transformed media images, advertisements, and all sorts of everyday objects by using a specific taxonomy. Formerly packed in the artist's small apartment, the archive provides a fascinating panorama of visual cultures on both sides of the former Iron Curtain. Scholar's work in series aimed at hybridization of high and low in art by fetishizing everyday objects and useless junk. Text collages, letters, notebooks, and translations form an integral part of the archive, amongst them important text on Western neo-avant-gardes. The layers of documents and translations shed light on Scholar's practice of receiving and sending signals. He used them to comment on information and disinformation disseminated by the government-controlled media, and also to negate the clear ideological separation into the West and East. Scholar's archive is not just the source of his artistic oeuvre, but also an integral part of it. His artworks are just a small part of a multiform artistic landscape that destabilizes the status of the artwork, the file, and the documentary note. Documentary note at all the same time. All at the same time. Archive, the concrete, materialized, and categorized legacy of Julius Scholar, enclosed in boxes, is numbered and described. Linking the archive to Scholar's manifestos allows us to perceive meanings among the associatively accumulated documents. Scholar Society seeks to share, manage, and preserve the archive in the light of Archive of the Commons, Color Society collaborates with international thinkers, activists, artists, and curators, expanding and rearranging archival substance with current readings, projecting our concerns, visions, and kinships onto it. Through Color's archive, though Color's archive becomes a place for discussion, negotiation, and the search for potentialities. Furthermore, we are networkers currently involved in the project Island of Kinship that interconnects and transforms the practical functioning of 6 middle-scale visual art institutions across diverse regions in Europe: Prague, Bratislava, Skopje, Cologne, Helsinki, and Riga. So this is the current show and our website. And finally, conclusions. Are East-South relations decolonial? The final question is if those relations between Eastern Europe and Latin America, which still constitute a blank spot in the canonical history of modern art, can be considered as decolonial. First of all, those relations not only implied a criticism of the bipolar organization of the modern world system, but they acted against the world's Cold War divisions. Secondly, by bringing together the two regions with no history of colonial domination in their mutual relations, the artists themselves renounced the model of cultural domination. Thirdly, the East-South contacts were developed independently from the logic of the Western art market and hermetic artistic institutions. The goal was the foundation of a new type of critical institution. While considering the following facts, one could formulate a hypothesis that artistic production related to exchanges between Eastern Europe and Latin America in the 1970s could be defined as decolonial, even regardless of its content. Artistic production that derives from those exchanges provoked a break in the logic of modern art world. Therefore, its study could contribute today to the process of breaking away from the hegemonic, universal, unilateral and mono-perspectivist narrations in art history. Archives are, first and foremost, communication platforms, and as such, they have to be transgressed, interconnected and revised permanently. Joaquín Barrientos used the expression archivistic activism, which is actually extending the documentalist agitation that potentially could lead to construction of new communities of researchers, activists, artists, curators, and the public. Archives need to be subverted, politically, economically, and culturally activated, starting from the absent, the incompleteness, the gaps that could be seen beyond the professional objectivity of the archivists. Thank you.
Thank you, Daniel and Katarzyna, wherever she is, for this extremely interesting paper, and we will get back later to all of these papers after the first session of papers will be completed. And now I would like to invite Javier Galan, who is representing also Anna Biderman. And the topic will, the subject will shift, will change completely now. Although part of it is common, because we are still partly in the post-socialist region, and in the succession of the previous systems, places, and in this hybrid geography. The talk is dedicated it's fascinating, to the media facades and how they are rooted in the Central and Eastern European technology and science. Welcome.
Okay, let's see how I fit this in here. This is a paperless paper, so I'm bringing my laptop. All right. Thank you, and thank you to your all Congress organizers. Hello, everyone. My name is Javier Galán, and I will develop also on behalf of my communication colleague, the Professor Anna Biedermann, the research topic of the media facades and Cold War media at the surface of an idea. Let me first explain the three scenarios where we are going to focus. The first one is going to be an international approach to the Hungarian company Electro-Impex. And as a result of Electro-Impex industrial innovation, the media facades development both at the city of Moscow and the city of New York during the Cold War period. It is perfectly known that the period when the electronic billboards were monochrome, from 1928 to 1968, from the installation of a very well-known billboard called the Motograph in the One Times building in New York, that you can see in the left part, to the massive billboard at the Estadio Olímpico Universitario at Mexico City. Let's focus in Mexico. You see, the picture on the left shows the Olympic flame on its way to Mexico from Greece, and the interesting part of it is that it is passing by Zaragoza. So I've seen coming from the University of Zaragoza, the Spanish city where our university is, and how the fascist regime wouldn't let them pass through without taking the most of such propagandistic opportunity. But the interesting part of it, despite this folkloric detail, is the Mexican billboard at the right side. And if you take a closer look at it, we can see the Electro-Impex Budapest brand there. Electro-Impex was a Hungarian brand that exported high-qualified electrodomestics to the entire world. We can find traces of the Electro-Impex export capabilities in up to 100 countries of 5 continents. This nation, Hungary, was by that time unbeatable in terms of exporting technology. And by the year 1969, 1970, has developed the public color, better said, the first ever colored electronic billboard. This is going to open a special chapter in the Cold War between Russia and the United States. I don't have the time of getting deeper on the Cold War history, but there is something, taking the most of being here in Poland, and we are also talking about Hungary, is that in 1956, the Communist Congress in Moscow supposed radical changes towards the street electrographic design, especially the admission of neon lights on the streets. In the summer and winter of that very same year, riots in Poland and Hungary were brutally suffocated. Tanks were sent to Poznań, here in Poland, and in Hungary there were thousands of victims. Well, these opened a new era of ruled propaganda that needed constant observance. For our interest is the fact that what Elektroimpex opened was a race for achieving the best colored billboard or screen, which can result hilarious nowadays, but really serious stuff for the two countries pushing to rule the world by that time. Yeah, already in 1863, the city of Moscow is going to tender a contract for the illumination of Moscow by kerosene. We begin to see the first electric lights in 1909, and by 1912, the creation of the Department of Lighting that we developed a large-scale plan for the construction of urban lighting is confirmed here. However, the First World War and the revolutionary events of 1917 are going to ruin that whole plan. After the Second World War, the city is preparing for the festival of the 800th anniversary of the founding of Moscow, and towards the end of the 1950s, the city is illuminated with neon signs, official and commercial. We are going to focus on one of them. The Kalinin Avenue, Kalininsky Prospect, today called Nowy Arbat, is a road inaugurated in 1963. We are interested in these new buildings on the south side of this avenue, which want to resemble gigantic open books. These buildings are not like in Moscow. They are unpleasant because they do not respect the urban planning of the city center. And there you go. Also, at the new avenue built to be a Soviet modernity scenario, we could find the very well-known Soviet urban technologies, such as graphic art, mechanical propaganda, volumetric lighting, and the ELIN screen that we will see in seconds. But first, let me show you how in the next congresses, among the many congresses Communist Party gave in the Soviet Union, this avenue was used, and as I previously stated, an scenario of progress. An scenario of progress, whatever that could mean by that time. And at the beginning of this new avenue, an electronic advertising and information light screen called ELIN was placed in 1972 with a considerable area of 240 square meters. It is the world's first outdoor video display designed to display not only text and graphic information, but also color movies. The main merit of the ELIN installation and the project around it is that it was the first giant television, first large screen design for the urban environment. What they did was that a massive TV. This is a TV. This is a huge TV. Now let's jump to the US. In 1904, the New York Times newspaper moved into a new story building on a small triangular lot. The square will take the name of Times Square because of this building. The slender Times Tower faced north, establishing both the vertical and visual axis of a wide open space. It was about to be the Times Square. The first electronic element that we recognize, known as the zipper, the Motograph News Bulletin System, an electromechanical news plinth installed in 1928 by the New York Times on the facade of the Times Tower, which displayed real-time news headlines from 1928 to 1963, long before the advent of computers. We keep on this very same building. The One Times building originally had a facade made of stone and terracotta. Well, the Times will keep the property until 1961. In 1963, 2 years later, one of the owners undertakes a comprehensive reform, replacing the stone and terracotta with marble elements. After many changes of hands, the building ended up falling into the hands of Lehman Brothers in 1995, but instead of leasing office space, what they did was they turned the 25-story tower into a billboard and made a 300% profit in 2 years. What had made this small company see the possibility of business? They hadn't invented anything. Prior to its arrival, the building had already been experimented with the Motograph News Bulletin first, but the prototype that would revolutionize commercial communication in large spaces years before the arrival of Lehman Brothers is the Spectacolor installation. Spectacolor is an advertising company that breaks ground with the first computer-programmed color-changeable message boards. They were at the end of the 70s of the last century, and now technological innovation had produced what we could already see as modern media facade. But not only, since they had introduced the television advertising action of selling time on billboards rather than usual practice of selling space. A change that would pave the way for outdoor advertising to become a multi-billion-dollar industry. An example of how the Spectacolor worked can be found in the video clip of the movie Ghostbusters, where an animation is made on the Spectacolor screen for its inclusion in the video clip as a detail of modernity. And while all this is happening, a never before catalogued exhibition has been taking place on the Spectacolor of the Times building. From 1982 to 1990, the Public Art Fund produced the Messages to the Public project, a project where a different artist is invited each month to create a 30-second animated piece to air every 30 minutes after a regularly scheduled paid program. These tables, because there are many, presents in chronological order all the artists and their works that have passed through the Spectacolor. In conclusion, we must say that during the past 20th century, all regimes invested many resources in broadcasting an image of modernity. These media facades, these billboards, served to the idea of modernity, no matter which idea of modernity was. And that was of great impact on arts, design, and culture, also to the understanding of our modern cities. We stand on the idea that the game board of the arts is played today more than ever in the streets of our cities, increasingly resembling an airport than a place to live in peace. It is for this reason that we are mainly interested in the museum institution continuing to extend its gaze beyond its own walls and getting to the streets. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Javier and Anna, for this paper, which brings us into an international scene, into the United States and Moscow, and Budapest, and the whole map. And I wonder how we should proceed, because we don't have much time before the coffee break. And the situation is not that horizontal. I mean, there is one person who stands and you are sitting. So can we yes, swap places? And it's not there is one mic. Ah, great. Okay. So it's very hard to sum up, to propose any synthesis, because we had three so different papers, so different places and topics. But first of all, apart from thank you to all of you, would you like from our audience to participate, to ask a question, to maybe know more from our speakers? So you are warmly invited to comment.
I can give you a...
No. Okay. So all of the papers were about challenging the institution of state, of bank, of the museum, and of artists, actually. So my first question goes to Maria, and I would like to ask you to expand on the censorship question, because you skipped that part. I saw it in your abstract, and could you explain a bit more about this Kutná Hora case? So why have you chosen this? This is not a very popular place to go in the Czech Republic, so I have never been there, and I wonder why have you chosen just this particular institution?
There is a delay in that microphone.
Okay. Thank you for your question. This gallery, of course, it's new in the landscape in general, not only in Czech Republic. However, maybe it didn't go through my presentation, but it already started in 1963 in Prague, and I understand that not everyone goes to Kutná Hora. Actually, it's complicated. You need to take 2 trains. So it's peripheral museum right now. It's a very good question about censorship, just because the events of the controversies and bribes that were appearing were very rapid and so on. So it was important for this artistic television, Artichoke, to cover everything quickly, and it was only the first moment when they published this documentary on David Rath and interviews with the creative individuals working in the museum. Then the intervention of police happened. And right now I spoke recently, a few months ago, with main curator Richard Drury, and the whole situation with GASC, and finally when it got quiet with the all controversies is the whole enigma, and the main problem in it is politics behind, so people in the power, and I really wanted to show this clash of people working in the 60s, were working against communists, and they were risking, and then they were censored, and they were out of the art scene as directors, with this clash of the post-89, when people do not hesitate to go into bribe situation, and losing this tradition of the history of fighting against the communist regime, for example. And to your question, why did I choose this case? This is my case study for my research, and I do research this in a comparison, using comparison methodology with another case studies and museums that operated working against regimes, authoritarian regimes, and still trying to display avant-garde art.
Thank you. Anybody would like to join us? The other question goes to Daniel, and your talk made me think of other AICA archives, like Artpool, which is now institutionalized. And what do you think of it? So, because the itineraries of the Eastern European archives And it probably goes the same to Latin America, I don't know that much. They are very various. Some of them still are held in private hands, in the hands of the artists, like for instance Net of Kozłowski, and the other were made into state archives, like Artpool. So what do you think? What's better?
Yes, it's exactly as you said. It goes from case to case, and there is no given method how the archives should move from actually private property of the artist or some kind of community of artists to the institution. How the archive could be institutionalized. There are various ways of doing it. The case of Artpool is, I think, very. It's very good that they succeeded to join the museum because also throughout the long time that they functioned as a non-profit organization, they managed to enter the museum. It's also a difficult process due to political situation, due to many reasons. But on the other hand, visiting today Artpool, you see the archive in very good condition, in a very well preserved way. It's open to researchers, and even more so, they established KEMKI, the Institute for Central European Studies. I mean, it's a really ideal case, and KEMKI recently acquired archive of art critic László Beke. So I mean, this is also very important to mention. And last but not least, there is a necessity to connect archives, to write about this networking. And I mean, there is this groundbreaking book written by Clara Kemp-Welsh, Networking the Block.
She's here.
Yeah, which introduced this topic. I mean, what I'm trying to do together with Katarzyna Cytlak, we are trying to do networking among institutions that house archives, artist archives, or the archives in artist properties. So our mission is to build a kind of network. This is one way, one part of our discussions, and the other part is really thinking how artist archive could contribute to nowadays to rescheduling, like rethinking, or even maybe unlearning the institutional practices. The case of Julius Scholar Society is one. We are a collective of 10-20 people. We are organizing many events. We have even small exhibition space. So we are trying to be active locally, but at the same time we are operating in the region, and we are trying to bring various people to our institution to think with us about the archive, think about the legacies of Neo Avant-Garde and Julius Scholar's work. I mean, nowadays it's highly needed, at least like in Slovakia.
Thank you. And I saw that Professor Clara Kemp-Welsh has raised her hand. Clara, mamy mikrofon.
Thank you, Daniela. It was very, very fascinating, and it's great that you and Katarzyna are doing this work. which you've been doing anyway for ages, long before I started doing it. But this question of how you weave the question of decoloniality into such a study is one that I think we're all very interested in, and still it's a work in progress to try to think exactly how we're going to define this question, because obviously there's a lot of pushback against referring to these kinds of relations as being decolonial in any kind of straightforward way. And I don't know if you remember, but last year, Daniel, I think you were there too, in Poznań, we had a very interesting conference in Poznań about these relations between Latin America and Eastern Europe. And the keynote speaker was Walter Mgnolo, who really did nothing at all to reflect on or accommodate the situation or the war, the invasion of Ukraine. He really appeared to have almost no interest in that, and instead, I thought very outrageously said that Russia and China were the only nations brave enough to stand up against American imperialism, which sounded kind of incredibly out of place in the context of our discussion. And he said that he felt that that the framework of decoloniality, of colonial relations, was not appropriate as a vehicle for thinking about the relationship between Russia and Ukraine, which many of us disagreed with. And he insisted that it needed to be transatlantic, and it was a historical series of relations that were concrete. And I think what's interesting about your proposal is that this is also transatlantic. But your main theorist wasn't Mignolo in the case of your paper. Your main theorist was Quijano. And I'm not very familiar with his work, and I don't know whether that was Akasha's contribution or yours. But if you're able to tell us a bit more about Quijano's version of decoloniality and how that works as a framework, that would be very interesting. Thank you.
Thank you, Clara, for your question. Yes, this was Katarzyna's part, but I would rather mention another theorist, Rolando Vázquez, for me, who's much more important because Quijano's writings are only to be, I think, published in English this next year. I think they are preparing translation, and since I'm not familiar with Spanish text of Quijano, so I cannot really say. But Rolando Vázquez's work is for me very inspirational in thinking about institutional transformations. And I would mention like two key terms which are related to archival practices. There is care and concern, and I also used this as a part of the title of this paper. Archival concern is not only about caring about documents, about care that preserves the materiality of the archive, but also about concerns, about questions, about thinking through these infrastructures and trying to propose the visionary propositions. And it's a rather complex bunch of tasks that is related to the colonial practices. But I think through Rolando Vázquez we could really touch also our region, or a question of Central and Eastern Europe being within the power games, global power games, and also rethink. For me, the crucial notion taken from Quijano is coloniality of power, and then we could. I tried to at the beginning to summarize this, and from this notion we could really think regionally and locally. So yeah, there would be much more for a longer discussion and more theoretical one, for which there is not enough time now. So this is just a very tiny answer to your complex question. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks a lot. And now I see a very, very serious face of president of Polish section, who gives me sign that we have to stop at this moment and go for a coffee. So let's put off the discussion on the last paper for the next panels.
I think
next
we will
meeting,
be able to find.
It was a very unique point that Javier and Anna made on the spectacular messages of the empty buildings, so the only exteriors, no interior, and seemingly no institution inside. So that was very inspiring. But let's stop now, and let me thank to all of you and to the audience, and let's move to another section.
Yeah, I think we will start the next panel a bit late, but it's like 10 minutes late, and the problem is we cannot move anything further more than 15 minutes. So please enjoy your coffee break, and see you soon in 10 minutes.
Ja mam zgłoszenie. Gdzie jest
It's
Thank you. Yes, I would like to introduce myself. Okay. Yes, nice to meet you. And what I was already mentioning you, because actually I'm working with the Rotterdam Gallery Studio. I'm the curator there, and right now I'm involved in a major project. But with Poland, like Poland and East Germany.
East Germany, yeah, I projected two postcards by Julius sent to Halftech Gallery Ascari.
Yes, yes, yes.
There was a very intense exchange.
Yes, and I will, or my research at least will concentrate on exchange in Poland here. Yes, but,
I'm only presenting tomorrow, but it's just to make sure that my colleague's video.
Okay.
Because if it doesn't work, I have to prepare her part as well.
What's her name?
No, it's here on the flash drive.
Yeah, like it will be tomorrow. At
Yeah,
Wednesday.
it will be tomorrow. We haven't sent it.
You haven't? You haven't?
No, we only have it here.
Her surname is?
It's
yes.
For this presentation, I'm Fabiola, and
Okay.
she's Luisa.
So it's like her part, okay?
Yeah, she's gonna do the introduction, and then I take over.
Understand it.
Nice to meet you.
I'm coming with the same request as before you.
The lateness.
So, first one? But you told me about the record.
It's in the.
It's inside, and
yeah,
you. Okay,
yeah.
now I understand. So this one, presentation Krakow.
But it's not the final version. It's just to test out if your system.
You want to like test?
Yeah,
Okay.
just to make sure, because if it works like that, I will continue on developing the presentation in that format. Yeah.
Hello, it's a pleasure to participate in this.
Everything, and when it comes to the projection, obviously it works.
Came here tomorrow.
Okay, no, I just wanted to make sure that the video worked.
Okay.
Okay.
So here's your pen drive.
And then I'll bring the final version.
Final version.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you.
Tak?
Kasować ten
Aha, ona jest jutro, tak?
Tak, jutro Magdalena.
Tak, Magdalena. To jest panel trzeci. Usunąć, dobrze.
Niżej jest jakaś tragiczna.
Aha. Chyba, że po prostu ją zostawimy.
Chciałam tu dołożyć jeden slajd, tak w kontekście tego, co nie mówiłam.
Myślę, że bez problemu może pani podejść i pan to zmieni. Dobra, to będzie. Słucham?
A które mikrofony działają? Przepraszam, Marta, Czyż i teraz będę jakby moderowała, chociaż nie mam za dużo czasu w ogóle na powiedzenie czegokolwiek. A gdzie mam siedzieć w trakcie?
Właśnie mam taką propozycję, bo Patryk jest osobą, która włącza prezentację, ale on przez to musi cały czas siedzieć tutaj. No, może zróbmy tak, żeby Patryk mógł sobie siąść na widowni i po prostu by podchodził i włączył prezentację.
Jasne, a jak
ty byś siedziała na przykład...
Tylko, że ja nie pokazuję prezentacji, tak?
No to...
Tylko ja po prostu zapowiadam osoby, które będą mówić.
Ewentualnie mogę się przepnąć chyba tam, do tamtego portu, być gdzieś tam w rogu, albo zostawić tego laptopa tutaj.
Tak, to tutaj, a ja...
Bo w sumie twoje zadanie jest tylko takie, że ty musisz podejść
Tylko
i
mam pytanie,
prezentację.
Sorry for that.
Welcome, welcome.
Tak, wydaje mi się, że można zacząć na to krzesło, no bo ja sobie po prostu przejdę i przyjdę.
No.
Myślę, że możesz spokojnie położyć.
Może ja ci przełożę to gdzieś na odwrotnie? Czy chcesz jeszcze?
Tak, ja to zabieram.
Zabierzemy na to krzesło, będą 4 osoby.
Mogę ci to zrobić ze szarcia.
Nie, kochanie.
Są robione. Będzie zdjęcie.
Ale teraz jak ja robię?
Idę zjeść ciasto.
Ja będę mówić 3 minuty.
Ja jestem który?
Ty jesteś mój drugi.
Drugi, no
Mój
dobrze.
drogi jesteś drugi.
Co, stresu?
O, Dubaj.
Okay, so I think that now we can really start the second panel. There are still people coming, but I think it's the time to close the door and just start the second panel because we are running out of time. It's a pleasure to meet you on the second day of our Congress in Krakow. I have to say that yesterday it was a kind of unofficial opening of our Congress, but I have to admit it was very, very emotional to see all the members from all over the world and representing so different nations and generations, and I'm really thrilled because it's my first Congress that I'm participating in, but it's also my first year in AICA board. My name is Marta Czysz. Very nice to meet you, and I will be leading the second panel today that it's called Instituting Eastern Canons. So I believe that this topic is very important, especially with all the changes that are going now in our geopolitical map in Eastern Europe, very floating and changing all the time, especially Poland now. It's in the moment where we are looking forward to some many changes, but we also were in this situation for the last 8 years where we had to cope with, and not only cope, but we had to struggle with many of the difficulties that appeared in institutions that were the institutions were instrumentalized by the political issues. But I just want to introduce the speakers for today. It will be Kate Bolos from AICA Hungary, Richard Gregor from AICA Slovakia. Hello. Stefan Schmidt-Wulfen from AICA Austria, Vaida Stepanovaite from AICA Lithuania, and Raluca Wancha from AICA Romania. And we will start from Kate Bolos from AICA Hungary, who unfortunately cannot be here today with us, so she recorded a video with her speech. Kate Bolos from AICA Hungary, but she has very special circumstances and explanation why she couldn't be with us today, because 3 weeks ago she gave a birth to twins, so boy and a girl. So really this time she had a really good excuse not to come. I hope that we will see her next year. So we will start with Kate Bolos. Thank you.
Hello. I am sorry that I cannot be there with you in person, and I am sending this video presentation instead. The title of my presentation is The Making of a Neo-Avant-Garde Canon in Hungary, a Tradition Without Visibility. The series of events that took place in Hungarian art in the 2010s have been undoubtedly labeled as the rediscovery of the neo-avant-garde. Central Europe's unofficial or semi-official second public sphere's direct political and also strategically anti-political references, all born during a totalitarian system, have often been considered when defining neo-avant-garde, and this heroic phase became synonymous with the term iparterv generation. The term derives from the Iparterv State Architecture Office, which housed 2 exhibitions in 1968 and 1969, facing different forms of censorship. These events can be considered as a starting point and a defining moment for unofficial artistic practices in the Hungarian art scene that encompass the latest Western tendencies like hard edge, photorealism, pop art, assemblage, or conceptual art, or better to say, they served as transfers deeply rooted in local traditions. However, Iparterv does not only stand for these 2 exhibitions or the participating artists, or either the preceding or succeeding events of similar nature, like the Suranon exhibition, merging local versions of surrealism and non-figurative art, but it marks the starting point of an era and encompasses the work of other artists from the same generation. Dora Maurer, who gained a vast international recognition in the previous decade, is from the same generation, while Ilona Keserű, another talent discovered by the international art world, even exhibited at Iparterv, the historicization and even the recently observable self-historicization of Hungarian neo-avant-garde thus includes the various forms of unofficial practices throughout the 70s. By looking at the large-scale exhibitions like the Iparterv or the one focusing on the Page workshop, organized by public institutions, and the number of publications that are being created in the last 8-10 years in Hungary, it is certain that not only the historicization, self-historicization, but also the differentiation and deconstruction have become a significant element regarding the neo-avant-garde. It seems that the consolidation of the neo-avant-garde canon of the 2010s goes together with the provision of an even more nuanced view of the cultural policy of the Kádár system, a long period named after János Kádár, who led the country after the suppression of the 56th revolution all the way to the change. So this cultural policy was defined by György Acél, the most influential character in the cultural context, in culture of the time. It is the 3T system the so-called 3T system that infamously divided contemporary Hungarian culture in three categories: the forbidden, tolerated, and supported categories, tűrt, tiltott, támogatott in Hungarian, thus the 3T. We can relate to previous exhibitions on research projects like the Parallel Non-Synchronism exhibition, which intended to show the mobility and instability of these three categories, pointing to the seemingly consensual elimination of considering official art in the decades between 57 and 89 into discourse on neo-avant-garde and post-avant-garde artistic production, a characteristic of the previous waves of canonizing neo-avant-garde in the 1990s. The exhibition, entitled Within Frames, aimed to present the official visual culture of the 60s had a somewhat similar nature. The show Separate Ways, Karl-Heinz Adler and Hungarian Abstract Art, a joint project of two museums in Budapest, should be mentioned in the same context. This exhibition, in parallel with showing the work of Adler, the famous East German artist, explored the possibilities of abstraction in the genres of mural art realized within the framework of certain state commissions in Hungary, as architecture and applied art was more permissive towards abstraction, while the doors of exhibition venues remained closed to these tendencies of abstraction and non-figurative art, or at least their possibilities for being shown at exhibitions were strictly limited. The publication of the handbook Art in Hungary 1956-1980, Double Speak and Beyond, published by Thames and Hudson in 2018, goes beyond the accomplishment of a much-needed reference book on Hungarian neo-avant-garde by consolidating the canon, since it raises issues that already practically deconstructed it. Issues such as male dominance, even in neo-avant-garde, or the status of minorities in artistic production are among these, while, unfortunately, the book got stuck by the traditionally Budapest-centered reading of Hungarian post-war art. A good and ever ambiguous example for the colonization process of the 2010s is the Bookmarks Project, a series of events exhibitions from 2013 to 2018, presenting a selection of neo-avant-garde artists' works initially put together with works by younger artists, considered to be representative in the rediscovery as well as in international brand making of neo-avant-garde. Quote starts, the Bookmarks Project is emblematic of the changing institutional terrain of the local art world in which rival galleries and prominent collectors work together towards the strategic goal of increasing the international visibility of Hungarian art, quote ends. The quote is from Maya and Jordan Fuchs, their essay placing Bookmarks, the institutionalization and deinstitutionalization of Hungarian neo-avant-garde and contemporary art, written for Tate Papers in 2016. Bookmarks events were a result of the cooperation of three private galleries, ACB, Kisterem and Vintage, all of them are from Budapest, after experiencing the lack of references and notions of historical and intergenerational continuity regarding Hungarian art from the international audience, as well as the scarcity of such handbooks or summaries available in foreign languages. Another defining element is the formation of the regional committees of Tate and Centre Pompidou that prompted collectors and galleries to act and react. Through this dynamic, the role of Western canon making and financial strategies can be regarded as a catalyst in the process. After the first show in 2013, Bookmarks was presented at Art Cologne in the collaborations section, accompanied by an Endre Tóth zero demo. The same year, Bookmarks was organized at the non-governmental and non-profit Off Biennial in Budapest, in the biennial's first installment, an event that already has a vast history and international recognition as a symbol of the grassroots cultural resistance in Hungary in the 2010s. To quote the folks again, quote starts, the inclusion of Bookmarks divided critics who either thought it to be the most accomplished exhibition of the Off Biennial or considered it too implicated in the grey zone of state and private partnership, while it was also commented that the presence of private for-profit galleries seemed justifiable if they provided an infrastructure and did not promote their own artists under the banner of the biennial. In the biennial setting, the neo-avant-garde works that were positioned in dialogue with their contemporary correspondences seemingly returned from a wide queue presentation back to the unofficial context in which they originated in the first place, quote ends. It is also typical that the most important events related to bookmarks' intentions took place at for-profit venues, specifically like the With the Eyes of the Others at the Elizabeth D Gallery in New York, or the Focus section at Vienna Contemporary, where the group selection was presented. Western recognition, inseparable from the private sector's lobby power, can be traced in the acquisitions, purchased or donated, between 2015 and 2022 by well-established Western and also Central European institutions. Among others, Imre Box, Katalin Ladix, Endre Tóth, or textile artist Margit Silvitsky's works made it either to Tate, Metropolitan Museum, MoMA San Francisco, Centre Pompidou, or in the regional context, Wrocław Contemporary Art Museum, as well as the Contact Collection in Vienna. Ilona Kesher's wall hanging with tombstone forms that ended up at the Metropolitan Museum was exhibited at the Elizabeth D Gallery directly. Dora Maurer had a long show at Tate, preceded by a show at Whiteview. Katalin Ladik participated at Documenta in Athens in 2017, and her large retrospective exhibition is currently touring Western Europe. However, canonization of neo-avant-garde already had a long history before 2010. Just to name some aspects, Art Pool's activities and collection in regards to presenting neo-avant-garde practices needs to be mentioned, and it's indispensable in the decades since Art Pool's foundation in '79. However, I must mention a few exhibitions organized at public institutions that were accompanied by publications and claimed to provide summaries of art historical results. Such a project was the Old and the New Avant-Garde exhibition in '87 at the King Stevens Museum in Székesfehérvár that presented references for research by compiling bibliography and chronology. The exhibition, The First Generation of Hungarian Avant-Garde, could be mentioned from '98, which was organized at the Szombathely Kunsthalle, as well as we can also mention the '60s exhibition at the National Gallery, which probably came too early with too large of an endeavor right after the regime change in '91. Making mention of the exhibitions organized at public institutions presenting private collections, like the collection of Iván Dévényi, Ernő Kolozsvári, István Rácz to a certain extent, is also important, as these few shows, like Gábor Ébli, art historian, has often written about it, confirmed that different generations of avant-garde are being present in such collections. It is an aspect that became central in the discourse of the rediscovery of neo-avant-garde, since the constantly interrupted continuity in art in Hungary, in which the connecting elements are often lay in the depths and is the recurring element in the discussions. The Wunderkammer-like collection of Ákos Vörösvári, resulting in the foundation of a private museum in 1990, was first presented at a public institution, the Budapest Gallery, in '84. That was part of a series of exhibitions that eventually lived only 2 editions after presenting the Vasilescu collection as the first one. It is quite interesting that private collections could appear in the 80s at state-run venues. This is quite interesting in a totalitarian system. The first private gallery, Austrian Hans Knoll's gallery, was opened in Budapest in '89 with the intention to represent Central European art, and it was quickly followed by Várfok Gallery. Both galleries are still existing. Knoll Gallery's role in art discourse should be emphasized because by recognizing the lack of references in the international art world regarding Hungarian art, they took on the endeavor to produce a handbook, the second public sphere, a publication that discusses 20th century Hungarian art. It was published by the gallery in German in 1999 and in Hungarian in 2002. The book definitely echoes the canonization process of avant-garde tendencies in the late 90s, both in terms of selection and in the way avant-garde is disconnected from the official art. Another gap-filling attempt was the production of a handbook, The History of Hungarian Art in the 20th Century. It was co-written by 4 accomplished art historians, and it was published in English in 1999. Immediately facing criticism regarding the territorial notion, namely what is the difference between Hungarian art and art produced in Hungary, expressed in the title. An important and often overlooked initiative that aimed to provide an outlook on 2 generations of post-war so-called progressive art came from private sources, but most importantly, it was a result of an international cooperation. The prominent Navara Galleries publishing department produced a large volume, The Studios of Budapest, in 4 languages, edited by art critic István Hajdú as early as 1990. The book provided a glimpse to the studios of 16 Hungarian artists and was to be followed by other volumes that eventually never happened. The refusal and criticism that the volume faced points out that such projects were considered intrusion in the making of the new canon after the regime change, especially based on the selection of the participating artists, a criticism that the Bookmarks project had to face with very often decades later as well. However, the documentative aspect of historicization already manifested itself in the proceedings of the second half of already the 80s, when Soros Foundation initiated the Documentation Center. It involved art historians to collect and archive certain pre-selected artists' works from the 20th century, compile biographies and bibliographies, the major part of them on artists now considered neo-avant-garde. Ludwig Museum's foundation is a crucial event in '89, after establishing the Ludwig Foundation in Hungary in '87, as well as the collecting policy of the National Gallery's Contemporary Division. After the change, the series of compensation exhibitions started, mainly dedicated to ipar-type artists to make up for them for the previous decades, causing ever-present tension among artists that can be felt even today. Somewhat against the often criticized postmodern new painting movement of the 80s, a phenomenon often attacked by the advocates of the young neo-conceptual art of the 1990s. Similar observations were voiced in the art press of the 90s, again revolving around the intergenerational aspect in Hungarian post-war art. However, as a less considered aspect of the canon-making process, the discovery of neo-avant-garde in the 2010s cannot be separated from the decade's local political climate, witnessing the restructurization of cultural institutions in Hungary, in which the role of for-profit actors shifted towards traditionally non-profit activities involving exhibition making, publishing, networking, and finding new strategies in financing culture and the activities of private galleries in the process. In the meantime, avant-garde attitude became widespread among younger artists from various generations as a platform and preset of tools of symbolic resistance. So we can assume that the canonization of neo-avant-garde as an intergenerational phenomenon had not been so effective in the previous decade without the current political climate, without the actual political climate of the 2010s. This phenomenon is becoming less and less visible in the 2020s. Like the younger generation lost its interest in avant-garde attitude, but the resuming of neo-avant-garde discoveries and even their trivialization is more and more present, raising the question whether the parallel of politics and anti-politics in the 70s and the 2010s can be any effective outside the self-referring nature of the art world. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much. And right now, not wasting time, we are inviting Richard Gregor from AICA Slovakia.
Thank you very much. Maybe later. So this is how I see the Central Europe. On on that poster. Thank you very much for being. I'm very happy to be here. It's I'm attending congresses since 2012, and especially this is the 10th anniversary of our congress in Košice. So I'm very proud to be part of this community. And not wasting time, I would like maybe to repeat some of schemes and things we are using in writing and publishing things about Central Europe. So we are now in the middle of the fourth decade since 1989. So I would like to ask some summarizing questions: how much we have succeeded in strive to post the art of Central and Eastern Europe to the international context. And I must say, in my opinion, that I don't find it very successful. The art of the Eastern Europe is now represented in the world mainly by the interesting and important solitary personalities, and I see it in three modes. Where I go? To the right or this? Oh, okay. First is kind of feminism, and I use also this term, the women destiny, through which there are many very successful, very extraordinary female artists that we have in Central Europe. I use some of these names, and the poster of the last arrival to this list, Maria Bartusova, who had the exhibition in Tate Modern last year and this year. We all know, and we were talking about it yesterday with somebody, there are many other artists on the waiting list. Second mode is, and the thought is just thought without H, I'm so sorry. Is just solitary, interesting, or maybe even exotic artists that succeed on the surface of notoriously known historical turns, like events in Budapest or in Hungary in 1956, like post-Stalinist thaw after 1956, again, invasion to Czechoslovakia, normalization, and martial law in Poland, and falling of the Berlin Wall, and so on. And this group somehow is overlapping the first one. It's not from the different list. Yes, it's just completing the list. And they use the photograph from exhibition of Julius Koller that was curated by Daniel in Vienna. The third mode, though of course Louis Bourgeois is not Central European artist, is the participation of contemporary artists in the international style of art that works as kind of representation of the capacities of the powerful institution. And in this artwork, and you can also replace it with many others, I would like to say the power of the scale. It's something that is very interesting for me. In first and the second mentioned mode, we only gained just partial success with export of very interesting solitary endemites, like the cherries from the cake, and the milieu in which they were living all the time, and the community of artists and critics that are essentially, especially in a closed society, essential to them, remains somehow unknown in international point of view. How they would not be, how they are not important. So I have a few questions. Which I find pertinent. So the question is, if we just have to wait until the time will come for our peripheral art history in global terms, that time may come when all the narratives will be exhausted in the world, in the West. I had a nice discussion with a curator from Paul Valéry Musée in southern France, in Sète. There is the Impressionistic school of Sète Montpellier in 1920s, and she told me now they are becoming to be important and interesting in the French art context because simply it's good to have new themes to write about. Then also is a question, what we gain with contextualization of the cherries from the cake, what we gain from it. Because, of course, it is a big propagation of the country, of the art of particular country. But let's see that this art is always part of repressive past of particular country, and repressive past that we somehow would like to get rid of. And overlap to contemporary artists, of course, we see it only inside our art scene. And overlap to the nowadays is maybe very small, very limited. And of course, with Maria Bartusova, it is a good example that success of the artist in the global environment means that we can't buy him anymore in our country. So if we haven't bought all of these artworks before, we will never be able to represent the art history of our country unless we will invest a lot of money in it. Another question is how, where we go from the theoretical point of view. Up to now, of course, the most interesting, my presentation works very funnily. Okay. Piotr Piotrowski told us to unite all of the peripheries, which is the main theoretical frame we have, and we, of course, are followers of it, and we try to work on it. This is the result I found in the street I live in Bratislava, so I just use it as an illustration. Piotrowski has many followers, researching relationships as we saw and as we heard today, very interesting and exciting between East Europe and South America, Latin America, and I hoped Katarzyna Cytlak would be here, so I used her example, where she is contextualizing work of Gyula Kosice in Argentina and Val, the group in Slovakia, with including Alex Mlinarczyk, and she put it together with a theory of architecture, of prospective architecture by Michel Ragon. And the question is if we defining more and more kind of interperipheral examples, if we are not making this Western definition of periphery making stronger, isn't it so that the connection periphery we isolate ourselves even more, but only in the bigger group of combinations? So isn't it just we are kind of emphasizing the dominance of Western canons? There's a question. And yes, the result is for example, the polemics. If this good idea to constitute the Central and Eastern European art history. And also the question if it is possible. The proof may be the controversy of this book, which was published almost recently, and it was many articles were published about this in terms of critical reflection of this book. But my question is, if we think about it. The book was established similarly like in 19th century when the ethnologists or ethnographics were collecting the folk songs. But only folk songs are replaced with the local art histories, those unwritten or those written in local languages, and plus minus we are now moving to the position that we write and translate those texts to lingua franca. So, To go a little bit further, I'm suggesting I would like to say that this very heterogeneous environment of Eastern Europe, we couldn't maybe find the common art history, and that's why I was asking my colleague Petra Hanáková for definition when one story is told by different narrators at the same time how they call it in the movie, and she told me it is called Rashomon effect. And good example can be the small segment of Eastern Europe, it's Central Europe, the countries of Visegrad 4, when we see all the differences between these countries that Andrzej Szczerski called once a bumper between East and West. But there is completely different histories, contraposition within national uprisings in 19th century, different position in the monarchies, different views on Christianity, and so on, different time of liberal, more or less liberal socialisms, and even now, if it's good in one country, the politics is definitely bad in the other country. So by talking to my friends, I used the metaphor yesterday that Central Europe, Andrzej said it's a bumper, and I say it's like when you try to cook the huge big turkey in a very small oven. So the surface is burned and inside it's raw, so it's never accurate, never completely functioning. So it is maybe so that Stalin's socialism united or unified the place of the area of Central Europe, divided it from the West, but then only make the individual connections with the West stronger, and that's why it is difficult to find out the common art history. And the thing is that we know how it was. Different books were important during socialism in different countries. That's one of the proof. This is, of course, my presentation today is a part of the larger text, so I'm just making the shortcut. So if you will ask me, then it will be better if you don't understand. And so this is a poster that was published in Czech Republic when probably when the premiere of the presentation of this Rashomon movie was. It's from 1950 by Akira Kurosawa, and it says Japanese film director Akira Kurosawa for truth. I found it perfectly matched with the idea of this paper. So Rashomon effect, as we know from the cult film movie, gives us a place, that we can hear more versions of one story from different sides. So this is what I'm mentioning with Slovak East European art history, Czech, and so on and so on. Of course, there are those 3 points, so you can put some other, you can add some other versions to it, because it gives us the space to express the motivations that bring particular writer to that particular version of the story. And of course, it's important because in these terms, each writer can emphasize his own story as a dominant, because of course we are all patriots in this way. And I'm convinced that through articulations of individual motivations to our definitions for art history, we can open another circle of thoughts, and of course it could be included in many other things and theories, and we could move then from the point where Piotr Piotrowski left his horizontal art history of united peripheries. Thank you very much.
And now, thank you very much, Richard. And now let me invite Stefan Schmidt-Wulffen from AICA Austria.
So thank you very much for having me. I decided to contribute a very personal perspective, and so personal that I didn't even look for pictures to illustrate it. For many years of my professional life, and you may understand that I belong to an older generation which talked last night, three times 10 years AICA, for this long professional life. I tried to judge artworks through a kind of structuralist activity. I compared an artwork with works, contemporary and above all historical works, of the same but also other artists, to define and to detect the aesthetic solution and finally evaluate the piece, decide for publication, decide for a judgment, decide for an exhibition. I was convinced that the value of the work would depend from the answer an artist would give to a question the art community would pose. So, for instance, Tadeusz Kantor would be dear to me because he infused sculpture with a sense of theatricality in a very interesting and surprising way. I loved Cindy Sherman's work because she not only appropriated part of a public discourse, but also connected a proposal of feminist identity construction with it. I worked with Pavel Althammer because he shared authorship, it seemed to me, in a very militant way, bringing his whole neighborhood into the exhibition space. Judging a work meant to elaborate a kind of mental map so that the present experience in front of the work would be related to what had already happened. The quality of a work would result from its significant step forward. Today, I cannot line up any artwork into any map. I do not see the lines of development surrounding and supporting a contemporary work. Instead, I'm reminded of many other works before, replicas. It seems to be has become a world of artistic replicas, but nobody seems to care. Apparently, my art critical tools are more or less out of function in these times. Or, to say this in another way, historical development, achievement, isn't a criteria of evaluation any longer. My map making, I hope, is not the quirk of an old art critic or curator. My experience does not necessarily testify a personal failure. I take it as a symptom of a major change in the art institution. Mine was a practice of someone participating in that very institution, a regular behavior, dependent on the infrastructure of that art institution, and therefore shared by every expert getting to evaluate critics, curators, collectors. Broken infrastructure is loquacious, says Marina Wischmidt in her programmatic essay, which it seems to me established the discourse of infrastructure. My experience as a critic is apparently the experience of an infrastructure breaking. But what is the infrastructure here at stake? Wischmidt also talks about the material guarantee that is given through the term infrastructure, originally established by an architect. She, however, admits that infrastructure is closely related to Foucault's episteme. I like still the term institution, because it is nearly as old as the modern outward, which seems to vanish now. And there are not many institutions in art when we take the cultural and political context into account. To focus on the ongoing transformation, I prefer to only think of two. I like also the term episteme, as it connects what we can do to what we can think. Episteme, like institution, reminds us that it is a significant behavior, that they are instituted practices that keep the institution alive. And I always wonder why art theory missed to incorporate a theory of practice that would much better connect it with the specific activities of artists and critics. The critical practice, my critical practice, refers to the artwork as a residue of another practice, that of the artist who through it addresses an audience. I think this is the basic institutional structure. The development of my mental map, which positions the artwork at a crossroad between personal and the development of an artistic community, identifies the artist as inhabiting an individual visual language that is in a significant relation to other languages around him or her. The successful artist seems to be at the forefront of a development, adding one achievement after the other, building a specific artistic identity. This role of the autonomous author gradually lost its legitimation since the mid of the last century. Think of artists who wanted to be like a machine, Warhol. Think of artists who relied on the cooperation with the viewer, Kepro, or even who wanted to swap roles, artist, audience, like Akonchi. Already in the 60s, the French philosopher Roland Barthes observed a movement from work to text. Indeed, artists redefined the work. They observed its incompleteness, openness, and therefore connected it into the context of other works. Practice became more important as the singular manifestation, the singular work. Imagine a Friday afternoon. All office workers want to get home as quick as possible and jump into their cars. The overall social result of these activities is just the contrary to what the individual imagined. They end up in a traffic jam that delays their arrival, and they reach home even later than during the rest of the week. This is, says the linguist Rudi Keller, a model of how culture works. Replace the office worker by the artist, and it becomes apparent that his personal intention is not really relevant for the cultural outcome. Artistic sensitivity is not bound to the individual. It has to anticipate the traffic jam. Artistic production is no longer an expression of individual genius. It is an index of a collective cultural transformation. His or her work does not so much belong into a discourse of an art critical self-reflection, but refers to a specific cultural moment. Instead of the prominent hand of a Picasso or Pollock, we become attentive to the invisible hand of a cultural production, so that the artist promotes an end which was not part of his intention. The social speaks. That would be my institutional change. This is why formal considerations lost relevance. The cleaning work is over, said Bruno Latour. The self-reflection through art by artists is over. And he's right. Nobody is interested any longer in the how and why, but in a critical examination of our societies. The artist in sensitivity and practice is also a symptom of culture, not only its reflective critic. He or she represents the collective in practice. Who is the author of an artwork today? And what does it mean for the practice of the critic? The author today is but a moderator who receives a message and transforms it. The artistic author has got public discourse as important rival. We experience public discourse as the dominant cultural form in which we have to participate. Topics, motives, forms are circulating, and as artist critics, viewers, we participate in this public circulation. The roles are not any longer exclusive. Artists turn into viewers, viewers turn into producers, critics are viewers and producers. When the artist becomes just a member of a community of practice, whose segmentation of the visible he or she is able to exemplify, then the critic meets the same fate. He or she is not any longer an expert whose judgment supposes consent. As part of the community of practice, sharing the significant practices, he or she cannot but contribute to the culture produced. This panel asks, are there any Eastern canons to be instituted? It is not very useful to try and define a canon which should describe a territory without taking into account different communities of practice. I would be interested to discuss with Richard Gregor if the concept of community of practice would allow to make these differences which you claim are missing. These communities might not be defined by national borders or even bigger unities like the East. It comes to my mind my former colleague Otobong Nkanga. She started her artistic education in her homeland, Nigeria. Then she studied in Paris, was an artist in residence at Rijksacademie in Amsterdam, and also did her master there. Her work is interesting, not because it follows an African canon, but because of practices that are connecting cultures. Her tapestries, her performative sculptures resonate from different cultural practices and therefore deconstruct the traditional paradigm of Western art. I'm not sure if I can compare the tradition in another continent and culture with the instituting of canons in the East. At least I'm in favor of licence poétique de la relation, defined through a multiplicity of relations and not through ethnic categories or ancestries. There is no pure culture, he said. Not the identical is laying the trace of life, but the difference. Thank you.
So now let me introduce and invite Vaida Stepanovaite from AICA, Lithuania.
Could you just scroll down and then maybe it will show up? Yeah. Yes, all right. Thank you. Yeah, my PowerPoint is not very advanced, much less advanced than other colleagues. So I think we can do with what we have. So hello, my name is Vaida Stepanovaita Kobelka. I thought I will throw in my second surname as we're in Poland. So I first wanted to thank the organizers for the inspiring program, and I'm also happy about the opportunity to present my research today. And wanted to thank the moderator of this panel and my fellow presenters. So in my paper, I will present a bit of an organizational spin on a panel's topic, because I see that so far my colleagues have presented more from the kind of art canon, the history of art canon and communities of practice, which is very enticing proposal that you gave. So I will talk more about organizational and institutional aspects. So I'll draw from my larger body of research at Goldsmiths College in London, which encompasses the desire to institute otherwise in arts under inhospitable conditions. So I would like to preface what I mean when I say desire, which might sound a bit weird in a context of organizational and institutional practices. But I draw this understanding from scholar Denise Ferreira da Silva, who contrasted our kind of insatiable collective desires to the demands placed onto us as governed subjects by institutional, infrastructural, technological, and logistical state management. Unlike these demands, our desire cannot be fulfilled by filing legal documents, ticking the right boxes, and calculating the shortest route to the goal. Desire provides not fulfillment, but something else, and I see it as having the political potential to fuel radical imaginaries that surpass the state's demands. So I have two main questions threading my paper. So we can go to the last slide. So I'm a bit out of yeah. So the first question I will start with is how do self-instituted forms emerge in resistance to the state's demands in the art field under different political conditions in post-Soviet Eastern Europe? Big question, but I will try to approach it by bringing out two moments of instituting otherwise in Lithuanian art history. And as such, I will take up a double-bound position. So I will provide the historian's perspective and will also bring more of a speculative eye as an art practitioner from Lithuania. So we can go to the second slide. Third slide. Thank you. Yeah. So from the Soviet Artists Union to the Lithuanian Artists Association. I would like to start with a moment on March 11th of the year 1989, on the cusp of the collapse of the Soviet Union. The Lithuanian branch of the Artists Union of the Soviet Socialist Republics had hurriedly gathered in Vilnius, the capital of Lithuania, for an extraordinary assembly of its members. An important question was at stake. Is it possible to continue with the dependency of Lithuanian artists on the Central Artists Union in Moscow? What action could be taken to free these artists from the strict bureaucracy of the Soviet state, in which artistic freedom is ideologically mandated and the artistic subject himself is bureaucratized? Inspired by the civilian mass movements in Eastern Europe chanting for freedom from the Soviet state, the Lithuanian branch of the Soviet Artists Union drew a daring resolution. This branch claimed that they're breaking off their ties with the Soviet governance and becoming a self-governed new Lithuanian Artists Association. And this institution is still going strong today. So when this resolution was signed and Lithuanian flag was waved and Lithuanian anthem was sung, there was way more work to do. The Lithuanian branch representatives, now Lithuanian Artists Association's representatives, they immediately left for Moscow when the resolution was first declined, and I guess there's no surprises here. After many stern exchanges and appeals in July of the same year of 1989, a new institution, the Lithuanian Artists Association, was finally registered as a legal body, but still in Soviet Lithuania. However, the Soviet state officially recognized the new entity only a year after this initial declaration, so in 1990. So kind of threw in this kind of lineage of facts, just to show that what is striking to me that all this administrative and legal effort was exerted by Lithuanian artists while Lithuania was still under the occupation of the Soviet Union. So the artists decided to establish their independent entity of governance 1 year before Lithuania was able to pen its own Declaration of Independence. And actually these dates are exactly 1 year, because Lithuanian Artists Association made their declaration on March 11, 1989, and Lithuania declared their independence on March 11th of 1990. And these Lithuanian artists, carried by political desire, they not only instituted a shared independent infrastructure, but also constituted a new collective subject, an independent and self-governed artist who became synonymous with the incoming democratic times. We'll go to the next slide. So here you can see my colleagues and I in another institutive moment in Lithuanian art history that I will speak very soon about. So the Art Workers' Trade Union in Lithuania. And before I go towards opening up this moment, I would like to briefly outline the shifts that public institutions incurred between Soviet and democratic governance in the last 33 years in Eastern Europe, just to set the stage on which we're basing our emergence of our institution. So in 1990, the newly independent nations claimed their institutions of governance for the sake and hope of freedom. As scholar Stefano Harni would say, this democratic freedom came with tenets of neoliberal governance, such as access, speed, efficiency, management of excess, and laws. These tenets battled the remnants of centralized Soviet bureaucracy, defined by corruption, shadow economy of goods and labor, and immobility. Neoliberalism also brought volatility into play that emboldened other aspects of these aforementioned tenets. Access came to promote surveillance of governed subjects. Efficiency started maximizing the quantifiable value of objects and subjects, and to prevent excess in laws, it needed to contain the subject's desires. So public institutions of art also started adopting these trajectories, together with artists and other participants in the art field. And that independent, self-governed artist that emerged in the 90s became an individuated, self-sufficient, entrepreneurial subject. So of course, there's way more to these institutional developments of the last 33 years, but I wanted specifically to draw out the conditions that made happen this kind of precarious situation that the individual creators are living in now, in which they depend both on the state and the free market, but yet they still lacked adequate social security. And such a situation became even ever more present during the pandemic, when individual creators saw their income drying out and seeing that they have very little financial security to fall back onto. And these were exactly the conditions that the Art Workers' Trade Union in Lithuania started organizing around in 2021. So it took us 2 more years, but the issues of precarity did not go away and rather proliferated in other ways. So finally established in 2023, Art Workers' Trade Union aims to better the material conditions of art laborers working in visual arts. We seek to better the national cultural policies, as well as the legal environment for cultural labor. We also carry a political desire, and referencing Marina Vishmet, it goes beyond ensuring better contracts. We address the precarity of cultural labor by addressing the unspoken social hierarchies in the art field, in which individuated artist takes the central stage. In 1989, the Lithuanian Artists Association participated in ushering in a new collective subject for the new democratic era, an individual self-governed artist, negating the figure of ideologically collectivized artists of the Soviet times. In 2023, the Art Workers' Trade Union takes it upon itself to establish an art worker as a new collective subject of the present times. And we see art workers as not only artists, but also technicians, translators, invigilators, curators, cleaners, designers, and everyone else with any type and fraction of labor in the visual arts field, both working in private and public sectors. And we want to bring the figure of an art worker into the discourse of post-Soviet Baltics and gather those who did not know they could belong together and claim rights as such. So I wanted to set this historical arc between these two moments of institutional and subject emergence, not to compare them. It would be very difficult, if not impossible to do, because both of these moments responded to very different conditions. By putting them together, I wanted to provide some points of entry towards understanding the institutional field of art in post-Soviet Eastern Europe. And there's another point that I would like to draw from kind of putting together these moments. Can I go one more? Yeah. Thank you. In my research and practice, I have noticed that for this field, it is of visual art in post-Soviet Eastern Europe, it's very difficult to get away from the cultural memory of the Soviet Union. The unsavory past keep intruding into the imagination of institutions that were reclaimed in Soviet times long time ago, from the Soviet times long time ago, but also they keep intruding into the new institutional forms. So therefore, it urges me to ask, how do Soviet history and cultural memory affect the institutional imaginaries in the field of visual art in post-Soviet Eastern Europe? Again, large question. But I raise it because I've seen firsthand how the Lithuanian Artists Association, an institution with such radical beginnings, has been perceived as embodying the inheritances of its Soviet history, when it was the Lithuanian branch of the Soviet Artists Union. While the institution is going strong today with over 2,000 members, and many artists of every age are applying every year to become members, the image of this association is often read in remembrance to its Soviet version. So I have to acknowledge here that Lithuanian Artists Association's history is quite convoluted. It takes up pre-Soviet, Soviet, and post-Soviet temporalities, if you may. Technically, today's association extends the work of an institution that was established in 1935 during the interwar period when Lithuania was building its short-lived democracy in between the end of the First World War and the consequent Soviet occupation. So Lithuanian Artists Association of that time lasted only 10 years until the Soviets came and usurped that institution into the Soviet Artists Union. And when Lithuanian branch claimed independence in 1989, they stated they were returning to their last known independent version. So the institution was adamant to restore historical truth and erase its Soviet period as such. At least this is what the witnesses of that event were saying. And yet, the Lithuanian Artists Association still battles its imagery akin to its Soviet history. And I have a suspicion that it might be so of this practical aspect. When Lithuanian branch declared independence, it did not rescind the infrastructure accumulated over the Soviet times. To this day, association operates many galleries and administrative offices across Lithuania with favorable rental agreements and many active from Soviet times. Also, the internal organizational structure stayed the same. So the members' assembly is the main administrative organ, decisions are made by the board, and most importantly, association is split into branches based on geographical region in Lithuania, but also artistic disciplines. So you have branches for painters, for sculptors, people working with ceramics, textile, and all of that. So I could see here how the image of the institution is being read still through its inherited infrastructure. And the recent art workers' trade union have also been read through the lens of the Soviet history. Being a trade union and not some other institutional form, we have been met with suspicion by a generation of artists who carry a visceral memory of being mandatorily unionized and contained by the Soviet Artists Union. So of course there is a phonetic similarity between Soviet Artists Union and Art Workers Trade Union. They're both unions, but the conditions, desires, and infrastructures are completely different. One is self-initiated, other was mandated by the violent state. One convenes art workers and the other concerned artists, and one responds to the urgencies of neoliberal conditioning of creative labor, and the other acted as ideological means for socialist governance. So we're battling the perception that the trade union reproduces the Soviet past. This is something that institutions have incurred, also other institutions in Lithuania have also experienced. But this is not even the end of our worries. Those in the West also question the potential of a form of a trade union. So what is novel in the East can be outdated in the West, where trade unions have been highly critiqued for reinforcing workerism and legitimizing the exploitative relations between the employer and the worker. But at this point of post-Soviet temporality, we found the potential in becoming the first trade union in arts and in the Baltics, and seeing where this institutional form could go, and what it could offer for the precarious creative subject. So in this paper, I have tried exploring the political potential of desire expressed in forms of self-instituting in the arts in post-Soviet Eastern Europe. I posited this desire against inhospitable conditions created by institutions of governance on different ends of the political spectrum. I have also noted how all the new forms of instituting otherwise that appeared in the arts in the wake of the Soviet state have been held in captivity of their historical lineage and at the same time read critically by the Western gaze. Nevertheless, I wanted to show that whatever the reading, we might be able to explore the self-led institutions in their particularity and how they model their forms of response that are most fit to their particular conditions. Thank you, and I look forward to our discussion.
Thank you very much, Vaida. We have slightly changed our plans because we are running out of time, and we're supposed to have right now a speech of Raluca Wancea from AICA Romania, but don't worry, it's postponed for tomorrow, so you will be for sure able to listen to her. So I want to thank once again Kate Bolosz, Richard Gregor, Stefan Schmidt-Wulfen and Vaida Stepanovaite for these great speeches. And we are really running out of time, but still I can't resist to just give you the voice for like maybe 2 questions for our panelists. So if you have some, then feel free to ask right now. Is there anyone who would like to ask a question? Up? Okay. 1 question.
Thanks so much for those wonderful talks. I found them super interesting, and just reflecting over what was said today, I think that for me, as someone who's coming from a very established institutional atmosphere, what we're talking about mostly is the process of institutionalization and self-instituting, and then when does that become an institution itself that needs to be reacted against. So I found that a very interesting thread throughout all the talks. And Vaida's talk I found super interesting. I was wondering, just in terms of like a terminology, what exactly an institutional imaginary consists of, and is that a collective experience, a collective imagination of an institution, considering how many different versions of institutions that we've heard about today? I'd be curious to hear more about what an institutional imaginary is in that context that she's speaking of.
Sorry.
Thank you very much. I'm thinking about some crisp definition I could give, but I don't think I'll be able to. I think, what I ended on, thinking about the particularity of institutional imaginaries and desires and proliferations of that, I think this is where I would respond, that institutional imaginary is very much dependent on its particular conditions, and especially in post-Soviet, Eastern European, Baltic historical conditions, but also the presence, and also how much are we able to model for the futures to come that are very much intertwined between the West and the East kind of dichotomy. I mean, I'm always battling, I'm always really critical of institutions, but also I'm very much involved in establishing and running not one of them. So I always have to be very careful about exploring what institutions are. But what I've learned in my practice and my research is that it's very difficult to define. It's very difficult to it always responds to what it needs the most towards the particular moment. It always responds to the kind of collective desire to institute. So that's why, I'm being quite abstract, but this is just where I wanted to take these imaginaries, because it's just, the crisp definition is just not coming, but it does very much depend on that political potential of desire that I'm kind of interested in. I don't know if that answers anything.
Thank you. I'm really interested in Richard Gregor's answer for Professor Schmidt-Wulffen.
Forget you will have a lunch then. It's very complex. I don't really know. May I say something to this question that was now also about the institutions, that more and more I work in institutions. More and more I work for institutions, I found that we have to consider own tradition of the institution. If I'm included in institution that already was existing, that's thing we always want to reflect it. We want to see it in some other light, but sometimes we are just ignoring its own history. And okay, the answer is I have a private theory for this, which I don't know how to call, but it's called the flow of the images. It's slightly Warburgian, maybe. The dialogue between images in closed society, because it must be I would say defined in which time the question was trying to find out. Yes, in which time was he asking? Where are you? I don't know. There. And so for me, the most interesting part of this is when I started to realize the inner dialogue between the artworks that was happening constantly in Slovakia since beginning of maybe even earlier, but since the beginning of 1960s. For me, it's the period between 1963 and 1993. But of course, there are new artists adding some other. There are answers, maybe there are questions, there are comments, there are some kind of reactions on something that already was existing. So this is if I would like to say something new about the collectiveness in these practices, I would say this: it's a flow of the images and the inner dialogue between the images. Something like Warburg was trying to find a much larger scale, of course. We can see it in the small place. I somehow am calling it Bratislava conceptualism, but we can call it any way in many different manners. That's it. Good. Bon appetit.
Thank you very much. We have 4 more minutes for maybe last question. And if not, then thank you one more time very much. And
thanks to Marta for moderating. And we're very sorry for this delay, but hopefully tomorrow we will, you know, develop a better pace. I talked to Sonia, and we agreed that you can arrive a little bit late to the General Assembly. 15 minutes is the limit. The restaurant is 5 minutes away from here, very close. And all the registered guests who are taking part in the lunch, please remember about your lunch tickets. And those of you who are vegetarian, please also notify the service at the beginning, okay?
Yeah.